Though we've been in love for 6 years, Arnold Porter, the chief legal officer of the Werewolf Council, has cancelled our marking ceremony 66 times. The first time he did so, he claimed that Erna Porter, his adoptive sister, was coughing blood in the middle of her heat. Decked in my gown, I stood in front of the altar of the full moon alone until the moon had disappeared from the skies and everyone had left. The second time the ceremony gets cancelled, it was because he suddenly received a message in the middle of the ceremony, saying that Erna was abducted by rogues. He tore off his robes and shifted into his wolf instantly, rushing to save her, while I was forced to endure the laughter of our guests. Whenever we are to hold a ceremony, Erna will always get into trouble and then seek his help. Finally, when he cancels the ceremony for the 66th time, both my wolf and I give up. I break up with him and leave. 3 days after I traverse the borders of the snowy plains riddled with powerful winds that conceal my trace, he seems to go crazy. He sends the elite guard of his pack on a mission just to find me. Chapter 1. Today was the 66th time my boyfriend, Arnold Porter, and I would hold my marking ceremony. We didn't invite many of our friends this time, our family and close friends were the only guests present. I forced myself to ignore the twinge in my stomach that had been there since early this morning while I confirmed the details of the ceremony with the officiant. Arnold, on the other hand, was utterly disinterested. He was sitting in the lounge at the side of the hall, busy massaging his adoptive sister Erna Porter's hands. When they saw that, my parents turned to me with sadness in their eyes. "Look," they said. "His so-called sister is the only woman he has eyes for. There is no space in his mind for you." Everyone knew that I cared a lot about the marking ceremony, for I wished to be his mate for real. We'd been together for 6 years, yet I was merely a candidate to be his mate. I wanted to make it official. However, when it was time for the marking ceremony to begin, Arnold, who should already have gotten on stage, decided to cancel it again at the last minute. I hurried over to take his hand in mine, but he flung me away. "The poison in Erna's hands has spread," he said. "She's in dire condition, and I must have a witch look over her. Today's not the right time for the ceremony, so let's cancel this time. I won't leave at the last minute next time," he promised. Without hesitation, he turned away and helped Erna into a car. We'd been together for 6 years, and this was the 66th time he'd cancelled our marking ceremony. The past me would have thrown a fit, crying until I lost my voice. I would have asked him why he insisted on walking away right before the ceremony began. This time, I looked at him calmly and said with a smile, "Go. Don't worry about it. She does need immediate medical attention. It'd be terrible if she lost function in her hands." Arnold was stunned, as though he hadn't expected me to agree so readily. "I'm glad that you're okay with it," he said. "I'll bring you some of your favorite cake, the one with chocolate and nuts, tonight." I inclined my head, watching as he started his car and drove away. The smile on my face was gone immediately after. He had forgotten again. I was allergic to nuts and had never had chocolate nut cake before. He'd bought that for me the first time he celebrated my birthday this year. I couldn't bear to dampen his mood, so I forced myself to take a bite. That night, rashes grew everywhere on my body. When I told him the truth, he was consumed by guilt. He held my hand, promising, "I'll remember that forever, and I'll never make such a mistake again." He'd forgotten again a mere 6 months later. The scorching sunlight at noon burned my shoulders and back. In stark comparison, I felt as though my heart had been submerged in ice water, gradually cooling down until no warmth was left. I let out a derisive chuckle before returning to the stage. After turning to our friends and family waiting there, I announced calmly, "The marking ceremony is cancelled." Later, I slowly tore the silver-feathered wedding gown I'd worn 66 times into shreds, ripping up the remnants of dignity holding this relationship together. I'd loved Arnold for 6 years, and it was high time this was put to an end. Chapter 2. I was sitting on the floor, staring listlessly into space, when my parents came over to comfort me. "Hillary, if you're tired, let's go home together, and you can stop enduring all this suffering," they said. This was their 66th time telling me to go home with them. I looked up despondently, meeting my parents' expectant gazes. My father was the beta in the Burning Flame pack. He'd wanted me to be his successor, but I didn't want that. I chose to be a lawyer instead. He'd wanted me to work in the court of law in the Burning Flame pack's territory, but I followed Arnold, whom I had met in school, to the Black Moon pack. He came from a family of rogues and was strongly resentful of pure-breed and powerful families. I didn't want him to think that I was from a social class he detested. In the 6 years I'd been with him, I'd never told him about my true origins. I'd gone with him while keeping my family background a secret. As far as he was concerned, I was born in an ordinary family. I started off as a nameless lawyer 6 years ago, but now I was the youngest chief legal advisor ever in the history of the Black Moon pack. Through our joint efforts, Arnold had also become the chief legal officer of the Werewolf Council. We had won all the awards for legal practitioners there were, and everyone would teasingly call us an elite couple. I chose adoptive parents for him who could give him a respectable status as an elite member of the Black Moon pack, just so he would no longer be known as someone born a rogue. This was also how he'd met his adoptive younger sister, Erna. As our lives improved, I figured he wouldn't mind that I was a pure breed, so I planned to reveal my identity to him after the marking ceremony ended. However, the chance never came. And now, I no longer needed to tell him anything. "Sure," I said to my parents. "I'll go home with you." Overjoyed, Mom took my hand in hers. "I'll buy a ticket now, darling, and we're going home right away. I'll make sure you won't have to stay here and suffer for any longer." After comforting my parents, I went home. Our house was as deserted as always. I took a piece of bread out from the fridge and opened Facebook as I ate. Scrolling down, I saw 9 photos Erna posted, showing her and Arnold standing close to each other and acting affectionately. I lied to my kind-hearted brother before his marking ceremony, so now he's traveling with me. I feel like he's a bit mad at me, but I cutely told him I'll treat him to dinner later, and his mood cleared up just like that. Hee hee. I couldn't help but retch in disgust. I knew that Arnold wouldn't come home tonight, just like how he hadn't gone home in all the previous times this had happened. It was fortunate that we didn't mark each other, which made it much easier for me to leave. The next day, I packed my things before heading to the law firm to finalize my resignation. I was a capable employee, so my manager, Charlie Robinson, tried his best to convince me to stay. In the middle of our conversation, Arnold came in holding his briefcase. I turned sideways to look at him, noting the lipstick stain behind his ear and the cloying scent of gardenias surrounding him. "That's what Erna's wolf smells like," my wolf Molly told me heatedly. He seemed to have had a good time the previous night. He hadn't changed out of his clothes, and he hadn't even gotten the time to wipe the lipstick stain off. When I left lipstick stains on him, he'd get mad and tell me to stop giving other people an opportunity to laugh at him. After that, I'd wipe my lipstick off before kissing him. So, it wasn't that he didn't like it when someone left lipstick stains on him. It was just that I wasn't the woman he was hung up on. Upon catching sight of him, Charlie acted as though he'd seen his savior and quickly said, "Quick, cheer your mate up. She wants to resign." "Did you guys have a fight?" I frowned. "I didn't resign because of him." Arnold stared at me in shock. Then, sounding perplexed, he asked, "You're resigning?" I pursed my lips and said nothing. "Are you mad because I canceled our marking ceremony yesterday?" he accused. After noticing something was wrong, Charlie left the room, giving us space to talk. The moment the door snapped shut, Arnold marched forward, cornering me. "I told you that I canceled because of the poison spreading from Erna's hands. Why can't you be more considerate?" I took a deep breath, trying my best to meet his gaze calmly. I'm not mad, I said. I just want to take a short break from my tiring work. He frowned pensively. If you want to take a break, you can just take time off. If you resign suddenly, everyone will think that you don't like that. Erna and I are so close. She's my sister, that's all. If such rumors continue to spread, how is she supposed to work here in peace? He'd forgotten once again. I'd already taken all the leave I could this year just for the multiple marking ceremonies that never went through. He was just worried that Erna would be the subject of gossip in the law firm. I chuckled derisively while an agonizing pain drove into my heart. My gaze fell on the skin behind his ear, but I said nothing. Upon realizing something wasn't right, he reached up without thinking to rub behind his ear. This is just a red ink stain. Don't overthink it. I shrugged, giving him a look of nonchalance. He'd explained why the stain was there, but his excuses were simply flimsy. I would have believed them before today. When he noticed my expression soften, he strode over and put an arm around my shoulders. He continued his efforts to convince me against resigning, saying in a kind tone, "Cheer up, okay? The bigger your heart is, the better your mood will be. Oh, and stop making a fuss and trying to resign. I'll take you to the rooftop restaurant tonight as an apology." I was so exhausted by this relationship that I didn't want to speak. He thought I'd said yes to his demands, but no. I'd wanted to tell him that I was going home, but I thought about it and decided not to. "Arnold," Erna called as she entered without knocking on the door. Arnold let go of me instantly, looking panicked, as though he was afraid that she'd see us being intimate. Erna smiled awkwardly. "Sorry for interrupting your chat. I'm here because I need Arnold for an emergency." Arnold made his way toward her immediately, and they walked out together. At the door, Erna tilted sideways on purpose into Arnold's arms. He quickly supported her with an arm around her, letting her recline on his chest without considering my presence. They embraced each other in front of me. A short distance away, Erna turned back and looked at me, smiling gleefully. I turned back, taking deep breaths. The next moment, the pink crystal bracelet around my wrist snapped, and the beads fell onto the floor. It had happened without warning. Arnold had given me this bracelet when we first fell in love. He wanted our love to be sweet for eternity, and he wished that we could be together forever. I stood there silent for a long time before slowly crouching down to pick up the beads scattered all over the floor. I tossed them into the bin, together with my lingering reluctance to part with him. Chapter 3. After resolutely handing Charlie my resignation letter, I handed over my work to my colleague Henrietta Pike, who was also a close friend. She held my hand sadly when I told her I was leaving. "After you leave, I'll be forced to endure the incestuous PDA these two shameless and indecent people are shoving in my face every day." She leveled a disdainful look at Arnold and Erna, who were currently canoodling together. Erna was obviously displeased, judging by how she was pouting at Arnold. To placate this difficult she-wolf, Arnold took out an expensive diamond necklace from his pocket and presented it to her. She perked up immediately and had him put it around her neck for him. When she noticed I was looking at them, Arnold met my gaze before averting his, looking somewhat panicked. "Arnold is just giving me a thank you gift, Hillary," Erna said as she got up and showed me the necklace. "Don't overthink it, okay?" Everyone turned to look at her when they heard her. They then looked at me, their gazes filled with curiosity. Throughout the 6 years of our relationship, Arnold had never given me any valuable jewelry. Now that he'd finally bought some, they weren't for me. Everyone thought that I was wronged. Even Henrietta was indignant on my behalf. "You and Arnold are a couple, and you're his future mate," she said. "But from what I see, they're making you out as a fool." I shook my head at her, motioning for her to not say more, then turned to meet Erna's gaze calmly. "It's gorgeous. It looks great on you," I said. Erna was surprised to see how placid I was. Provocatively, she said, "This necklace isn't worth much, Hillary. There's no need to get mad at me." I frowned slightly. I hadn't even bothered with getting mad. I had many necklaces like hers, but I didn't like any of them. "You shouldn't be so petty, Hillary," Arnold admonished me, assuming that I was unhappy about it. "Don't overthink it." I found all that ridiculous. Sighing, I said, "I'm not mad. Really. You're the ones who shouldn't overthink it." Arnold seemed surprised, judging by his gaze, and he remained suspicious. "That'd be great." He then took Erna with him. "Are you going to let them off the hook just like that?" Henrietta asked, bemused. I smiled derisively, shrugging with casual nonchalance. "They can do whatever they want to. I've decided to break up with him, so he can do anything he wants." Arnold and I had tried to hold our marking ceremony 66 times without any success. When word of that got out, it'd sound like a joke. Now, I was exhausted. After I packed up my things at my desk, I prepared to leave for the day. It was then that Arnold walked up to me and looked at me earnestly. "I booked a table at the restaurant," he said. "We're having dinner together." His gaze traveled to my wrist, where the bracelet was nowhere to be seen. Shocked, he asked, "Where's the pink crystal bracelet I gave you?" "It's a bother when I'm washing up, so I removed it." "It's at home." He was obviously relieved, but he didn't seem that happy about it. "You were wearing it every day without complaining about how bothersome it was. What changed?" I was trying to explain myself with a frown on my face when Erna came over, wiggling her hips as she walked to stand beside him. "You're going to dinner, I'm going too," she proclaimed. Attracted to the cleavage she'd taken care to squeeze out, Arnold nodded. I said nothing as I followed after them, then watched as Erna got into the passenger seat without thinking about who she was. I'd never sat in the passenger seat throughout the past 6 years because Arnold had told me that he'd only allow his mate to sit there, and I could only do that after our marking ceremony. When Erna turned back to look at me with that arrogant gaze of hers, I chose to ignore her. Whatever. I no longer had any expectations. I'd leave this place the next day, anyway. After sitting down at our table, Arnold and Erna ordered without asking me what I liked. It seemed my only purpose here was to get the couple started on their date. When the food was served, Arnold passed me some food. "You're too skinny," he said. "You need to eat more." My thoughts wandered when I picked up on the gentleness in his gaze. I'd never thought he'd show such concern to me. Erna giggled, following suit. "Women look sexier when they put on some weight, Hillary," she said in a cloying voice, glancing at Arnold. "That way, it feels nicer for Arnold when he hugs and touches you, he'll get addicted to you." Arnold blushed, coughing softly. "Cut it out, young lady." Erna laughed as she leveled a suggestive look at him. "This is nothing, Arnold. You're the happy couple here, I just want things to be better for both of you." Arnold passed her an appetizer, saying, "You should eat more too." I watched as Erna rubbed her chest on Arnold's arm. As I looked down at the food on my plate, I couldn't muster up an appetite. I didn't want to eat anything. I tried to take a bite, but I couldn't swallow anything. The next second, I bent down and spat the food back into my plate. A silence fell over the room. Erna said, wrinkling her nose, "Oh, why would you do that? If you don't feel well, you should have gone home and rested instead of ruining things for us." "My stomach feels a bit off," I replied. "What's wrong with it?" Arnold asked worriedly. "Do you want to get it checked up at the hospital?" I shook my head. "I'll feel better after a break." I didn't have a stomachache, I was merely disgusted by the food they'd put on my plate. They didn't ask any more questions. Famished, they dug in without a word. After dinner, Arnold volunteered to drive Erna back to her place, and he told me to wait for him at home. I didn't, though. I headed straight to the airport. When I unlocked my phone, I saw that Arnold had sent me a message, saying he'd taken the initiative to plan our marking ceremony. Perhaps he was feeling guilty and wanted to compensate me. The marking ceremony will proceed smoothly this time, and I won't be called away again. Believe me, his message said. I calmly replied, okay. However, I knew that the ceremony would not proceed. No matter what he'd said, it'd be cancelled again, like all the previous attempts. When I was walking over to my boarding gate, he sent over another message. Erna's hands are hurting again, so I'll stay and take care of her. Remember to close the door before you go to sleep. I scoffed. See? I'd figured him out. Sure. You don't need to travel to and fro all the time from today onward. Just have her stay at your house. I've moved out. We'll never talk to each other again. Good riddance, Arnold. After sending this message, I blocked him on everything without hesitation. The airplane rose into the skies. Outside the window, the Black Moon Pack's territory became further and further away from me, like past dreams scattering in the breeze. My heart was already set on my new journey. On the other end, Arnold looked at the screen of his phone, rooted on the spot. Chapter 4. While the moon was still bright, Erna shook her hips in front of Arnold, showing off the sexy dress she was wearing. She looped her arms around his neck, breathing in his ear, I'm wearing some new panties today. Before she could finish her sentence, Arnold pushed her away and shot up abruptly. Don't touch me. Erna froze, shocked by his fury. Arnold kept on calling my number, but nothing went through. He'd even tried to reach me through our mind link, only to realize that we weren't linked because we'd never marked each other. He had no choice but to call me again and again, but I didn't respond even once. No, this can't be. You're just mad at me. You're playing a trick on me. Arnold figured as long as he went home, he could find me, and everything could return to how it was before. As he shoved the door open and broke out in a run, he heard Erna call him, but he pretended he hadn't heard anything. He got into his car and sped back home as fast as he could, only to return to a dark house. I'd always feared the dark, so I usually turned on the light when I slept. However, it was pitch black now. His heart thumped anxiously as he stumbled forward toward the bedroom in search of me, calling my name. Hillary. There was no reply. He searched through the house, but I wasn't there. Even my things were gone. That sent him into a panicked frenzy. He hurriedly opened the closet, which only held his clothes. Mine were gone. He saw a photo of us in the room. He picked it up, recalling that we'd taken this photo at school when we graduated. This was also the only photo we'd taken together. When we'd stood together in front of the camera, he'd promised to treat me well my whole life. Ever since we began working and Erna appeared in his life, he grew to focus on her and forget about me. He realized his mistake, but then he figured he'd compensated for all his blunders. Every time our marking ceremony was cancelled, he'd apologize to me and take me to dinner, among other things. However, upon second thought, something seemed off. Erna always ended up joining our dinners, and he never asked me what I would prefer to order. Even when he heard me say that my stomach hurt, he didn't have the server pour me a cup of warm water. Instead, he continued chatting and laughing with Erna. He couldn't believe he'd ignored and mistreated me again and again. Arnold began looking for other traces of me, but nothing remained, because I'd made sure of that when I left. When he found nothing, he stood there, rooted on the spot. Suddenly, he realized Erna had eaten the birthday cake he'd gotten me and had been given the clothes he'd bought for me because she'd liked them. It had happened again and again, all the gifts he'd gotten for me ended up in Erna's hands. That was why I'd gotten only a few things from him. On the other hand, Erna owned bracelets, necklaces, and rings Arnold had given her. The more he thought about it, the more ridiculous it seemed. He immediately left for the law firm. Chapter 5. Charlie was still working in the office when Arnold barged in, demanding answers. Did Hillary really resign? You didn't know? Charlie asked, confused. After you left, she submitted her resignation letter. She was determined to leave and said you were fine with it. Arnold froze in bewilderment. He suddenly thought of the many times I tried to tell him something but stopped before I could. If we weren't interrupted by Erna, he would be called away. We hadn't spent any moment of the day together, and his attention was entirely on Erna. After snapping back to his senses, he looked at Charlie expectantly. Do you know where she's gone? Charlie shook his head and left. Befuddled. Arnold had no idea where I'd gone, and he realized he had nothing to hint at where I might have gone. He merely stood there, staring into space. While deep in thought, he recalled a lot of memories we shared together. The first time we met each other 6 years ago was in a classroom at law school. The class we were taking had many students, and we'd have to fight for our seats. He'd come over and sat on the seat I'd saved for my classmate without asking, snatching a book from my table and flipping through it. I asked him to leave, but he wasn't having it, stubbornly remaining seated with his back straight. I tried to pull him off, only to accidentally touch his chest. That sparked something between us, and our wolves also began to develop an attraction to each other. When someone behind me left, he went to sit down there. He told me that this was his first time attending this class and that he had no idea he needed to reserve a seat in advance. He sat beside me because he thought that seat wasn't taken. We got to know each other because of this misunderstanding. Ever since then, we kept on happening across each other, and we gradually became closer. From classmates, we became friends, then lovers. I came with him to the Black Moon Pact to build our careers, hoping that we could build a home together there. We were happy until we got ready to hold our marking ceremony and become formal mates. From then on, Erna began to occupy more and more of his life. Some people I knew were affronted on my behalf. They'd say that Erna had shamelessly seduced Arnold, that she and her wolf didn't know shame. I knew, though, that she wasn't the one in the wrong here. Arnold wouldn't have hurt me for Erna or some other she-wolf if he truly loved me. Arnold turned back, exhausted. When he walked out of the room, a familiar pink flash of something in the trash bin caught his attention. When he went closer for a look, he saw the remains of a pink crystal bracelet. Only then did he realize the bracelet he'd given me had snapped. Arnold pursed his lips. He bent down and picked up the beads one by one. His eyes reddened without him knowing it. Henrietta happened to be working overtime, so she saw everything. She crossed her arms before her chest and said derisively, "She's gone now. What use is regretting everything now?" While wiping his eyes, he looked at her hopefully. "Where did she go?" Henrietta sneered. "You're her boyfriend, and you don't have an answer. Why would I know where she's gone? This shows how crappy you are as a boyfriend." Arnold's expression fell upon being reminded of that. He was, indeed, a crappy boyfriend. "She'll come back. With how much she loves me, I'm sure she'll forgive me. She doesn't live that far away from me," he continued. "I'll take tomorrow off and look for her." Henrietta couldn't help but laugh. She said coldly, "Don't bother, she doesn't live there. She isn't born from an ordinary family either." Arnold was shocked. "That's impossible. I've been to her house." Henrietta's laugh became louder. She taunted, "You were born to rogues." She didn't want to hurt your pride, so she faked an ordinary background. "She's born from nobles in the Burning Flame Pack." Arnold trembled, and his face paled. Images of me from when he first knew me appeared in my mind. Only then did he realize that my cheapest clothes back then already cost thousands of dollars, a fact he was blind to when he was fresh out of society. My elegance and poise were also a mark of my noble origins. Upon noticing that Henrietta was about to leave, he quickly stepped forward and stopped her from leaving. Tell me her real address, Henrietta, please. I know that you're friends with her, so I'm sure you know where she is. Do me a favor, please. Henrietta appeared displeased. I don't know anything. Even if I did, I wouldn't tell you. She's finally freed herself from her manipulative, gaslighting boyfriend. I'd never let you control her again. Arnold felt resigned. Throughout the past 6 years, he'd been the manipulative man Henrietta had spoken of. Even if you've become the chief legal officer of the Werewolf Council and now have both power and status, you've lost the she-wolf who endured suffering and strove for a better life with you. I wonder, can you still feel happiness? Henrietta said meaningfully. She detested Arnold, whom she thought had forgotten himself after achieving his current status. Arnold was rooted on the spot, looking conflicted. He slumped against the wall, rubbing a hand over his forehead. I'll go to the territory of the Burning Flame Pack for her, he decided. Chapter 6. It was already dark when I returned to the Burning Flame Pack. My parents were waiting for me at the airport, excited to see me at the arrival gate. Mom surged forward joyously and pulled me into her arms. You finally thought it through, darling. I hugged her back. Sorry for making you worry, Mom. Dad came over and patted me on the back with a big grin. You've matured. I'm happy you're back. The house looked the same as when I'd left. After taking a break for a few days, I reported for work in a law firm here. I preferred to keep a low profile, so I didn't tell anyone that I was the beta's daughter. I entered the law firm as an ordinary intern, starting a new beginning. After leading a new life and working in a new firm, it became much easier to come into contact with new things and people. From today onward, I'd live my life for myself alone. If I could become a famous lawyer at the Black Moon Pack, I could do so here. Soon, the 3-month probation period was up, and I began work in the firm as a formal hire, as I wished. My ecstatic parents prepared a celebratory dinner, as becoming a lawyer in the Burning Flame Pack wasn't easy. One day, we heard a commotion outside when we were about to start eating. Our butler, Dave Marksman, strode in briskly with a frown, pointing at the door. Sir. Madam, a man outside is insisting that he's Miss Hillary's mate. My fork paused in midair. Shoo him away from the premises, ordered Dad. He was enraged, for he knew who exactly showed up at our door. It's pointless, sir. He's already been here a few times, Dave said, expressing his concerns. If this goes on, word will get out, and Miss Hillary's reputation will be tarnished. With a sigh, I put down my fork and knife, intending to go out for a look. Mom took my hand, she didn't want me to go. I patted her hand in reassurance. I'll have to deal with these problems eventually. At the door, I saw Arnold, whom I hadn't seen in months. Hillary, he began. He looked much thinner than before, and he now sported a beard. He seemed exhausted and drained. How did you find me? I asked. Arnold sighed in relief before answering hoarsely, I exhausted all my connections, spent a considerable sum of money, and deployed mass manpower just to find you. I came after I knew that you were here. He carefully withdrew a bracelet from his pockets. This is the bracelet that snapped all those months ago. I found it and had the beads threaded through a sturdy length of string. It won't snap again. I was surprised to see the bracelet I'd worn for 6 years presented to me in perfect condition, but after a second glance, I noticed that some of the beads were marred with thin fissures. I don't need it anymore, I said. You may as well give it to Erna. Arnold cast his gaze down sadly. I'm sorry for what I've done to you. I only realized how terrible I'd been to you after you left. Give me a chance to compensate for my mistakes, can you? With a frown, I declined without hesitation, no. Why would I put myself through living hell twice? Chapter 7. Arnold didn't give me an answer. Instead, he stepped forward and stuffed the bracelet into my hands. This is your favorite bracelet, so keep it. I feel safer after knowing you're safe. I want you to be happy too. I sneered as I looked down at the bracelet in my hands. I don't need it anymore, Arnold. I no longer like it either. I tossed the bracelet into the pond beside us. It sank quickly and disappeared. Arnold's eyes widened in shock. He opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but nothing came out. I liked the bracelet because I loved you. I'd naturally keep what you gave me properly, I said. Now that I no longer love you, the sight of your gift disgusts me. My cruel words brought a dejected look to his face. This was the first time I'd seen him look like that. I'd shed countless tears for him, the first time someone had taken revenge on him after a successful case, when he bought our house after becoming the chief legal officer of the Werewolf Council on his own merit, the countless times he'd abandoned me for Erna. He'd comfort me at first, but he soon began to ignore me. Now, I wasn't swayed by his display of sadness. He was just sad because I didn't want him anymore. How could he not feel sad when the maid who had taken care of him all day was gone? I turned and left, completely ignoring him. Mom was relieved to see how calm I was. She breathed a sigh of relief and deposited a piece of steak on my plate. Eat up, she said. I took a bite. It tasted good. On the plate was also some asparagus Dad had grilled for me. This was the caliber of love I received at home. I'd never had anything like this when living with Arnold. Fortunately, I'd come to my senses and come home. The next day, Polly Duff, an administration officer at my workplace, came to my desk holding a bouquet of flowers. You have an admirer, Hillary. I stared at the roses in confusion, almost as though in a trance. I came across a handsome man at the door, she explained. He had me pass this to you. I got up from my seat and picked up the card tucked in between the blooms. I'm sorry, Hillary. Please forgive me, it said. I scoffed. Arnold had never given me flowers before. He had done this only to win me back. Unfortunately, I didn't like flowers. If you like the flowers, you can have them. If not, just toss them, I said to Polly. Flowers given by an unscrupulous man disgust me. Polly seemed surprised, but she took the flowers away. Little did I know this would happen again and again in the days that followed. It was as if Arnold had been cursed. Now, fearing that I wouldn't like them, he never delivered them using the same method. Everyone gradually came to know that I was passionately pursued, and my desk couldn't fit any more of those flowers. Polly was on the verge of crying. She'd say no every time, but Arnold would wear her down gently and convince her to take them in. When she complained about this to me, I told her to lob the flowers toward his face and tell him to get out of here. He refused to relent, though, delivering those bouquets without fail. Finally, at my limit, I waited for him one day at the door. When he saw me stand there, he strode over happily, assuming that I was waiting for him. Before he opened his mouth, I splashed the cup of coffee at him. Are you awake now? I asked. Did you think I'd forgive you just because you're expressing your regret every day? After stepping back in shock, Arnold touched the liquid on his face. I just want you to be happy. That wasn't enough, it seemed. I snatched the bouquet in his hands and tossed it on the floor before stomping on it vehemently. The sight of you annoys me and makes me dislike you even more. He cast his gaze down, watching me step on the flowers while looking a kid lost on what to do next. Chapter 8. I thought Arnold would leave after that day. I didn't know how he'd managed it, but he roped in Polly to help him, and all my colleagues were on his side. When I reached the church and entered the hall, it was decorated painstakingly for a marking ceremony. I was shocked by the sight. I'd come here for a trip, but my mood was gone after seeing Arnold. He'd replicated the venue of our first attempt at holding a marking ceremony and was smiling at me, wearing a suit I'd tailored for him. "Will you let me mark you, Hillary?" He got down on his knee in front of me, gazing at me earnestly. Mark her, my colleagues chanted in the hope that I would say yes. Arnold's eyes shone. He looked a fraction more confident than before. That stoked the flames of fury in my heart. I glared at him, incensed. He'd been an intelligent man, but this was absolutely idiotic of him. Did he really think I'd say yes after he'd relentlessly pestered me for so long? Where did his confidence come from? Did you think I'd forget about what you've done after this marking ceremony? Consumed by fury, I slapped him across the cheek, shocking everyone present. Silence fell in the church. Several seconds later, a colleague of mine asked in confusion, "Isn't he your boyfriend?" I turned to look at her and scoffed. "Did you just believe what he said about being my boyfriend? We broke up a long time ago. And he wants me to bear his mark. How preposterous." My colleagues traded awkward looks in silence. Meanwhile, Arnold got up and extended a hand, wanting to hold my hand. I retreated in aversion. "I'm sorry. I screwed up, I know," he said. "I'm not doing this because I want you to forgive me, I know you won't. I just want to compensate for the ceremonies we've missed. I want to make you happy, that's all. Throughout the years, I've prioritized Erna over you. She's just a sister to me. I couldn't bear to see her suffer from her sickness, so I cared for her. I eventually thought, mistakenly, that I fell in love with her. I dared not acknowledge my feelings, so I chose to ignore them. Only after you left did I realize I was absolutely wrong. You're the only woman I love, not her. Even if you don't want to be marked now, I'll organize the ceremony 66 times. I'm willing to compensate for all the cancelled ceremonies, as long as you'd forgive me. I love you, Hillary. I want to be your mate and be by your side my whole life. If you want to stay in your pack's territory after we get together, I'll stay here with you. I'll go anywhere you go." Choking back sobs, he implored, "Give me one more chance, please." I looked at him coldly, a frown on my face. He wanted me to give him a chance, as if I would ever. I'd given him 66 of those, but he'd squandered all of them. He'd loved someone else but denied it. He'd betrayed me by showering Erna with affection. Even if I'd forgiven him, he'd eventually make the same mistake again. This was true of all men. The moment I'd decided to come back home, our relationship had totally come to an end. "Enough of your fantasies. I'll never forgive you." After leaving those merciless words behind, I turned and left. He watched as I walked away, chasing after me when I got in the car. I told the chauffeur to start driving. Outside the window, Arnold ran after my car, only stopping when he couldn't run anymore. I felt calm. All this was now meaningless to me. Chapter 9. After the fiasco ended, I told my colleagues seriously that I'd never date anyone. I also told them to stop concerning themselves with my personal affairs. As far as I was concerned, she-wolves should prioritize their careers. Men and relationships, on the other hand, should get out of my way. Arnold never appeared after that, and I figured he must have returned home. My career gradually took off. After successive court victories, I was appointed the chief legal officer of the Burning Flame Pack. My colleagues saw my parents when they were celebrating my promotion. I was anxious that they'd assume I'd gotten to where I was today because of my family background, but all of them praised me. "Now I know where your skills must have come from. You've inherited genes from your powerful parents. As they say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree." I was relieved to note their nonchalance. It turned out that I'd done a great job. I didn't need to rely on anyone or attach myself to someone else. I became famous for my skills in the pack, and many came to me for help with difficult cases. Of course, I was never short of pursuers, but I rejected all of them. I no longer trusted any man outside of those in my family. Although I'd rejected Arnold, I needed time to forget him. Years later, I came to the Black Moon Pack's territory for work. I would have said no all those years ago, but I'd already put my past behind me. I'd even told my colleagues that. I knew this place well and could show them around. Everything I saw here felt familiar. On the way to our destination, we passed by the law firm I'd worked in. After some thought, I decided to meet Henrietta for old time's sake. I hadn't seen her for years, and I missed her. After several years, both of us had changed a lot. She'd grown her hair out and was wearing a full face of makeup. She was shocked to see me. "Hillary." I smiled, giving her a thumbs up when I noticed the awards she'd received over the years that decorated her office. "It's really you," she exclaimed, engulfing me in a hug. "It's me, of course," I said as I hugged her back. "It's been years since we last saw each other. I miss you. I'm here for work, and I thought I'd swing by." She grinned. "You came at the right time. Both Arnold and Erna aren't working here anymore." I had no intention of asking about them, but I listened now that the topic came up. It turned out that Arnold seemed to be cursed with misfortune. He was no longer in tip-top condition, and he'd become mediocre at his job, losing most of his lawsuits. Soon, he was demoted from his position as chief legal officer of the Werewolf Council. After getting pregnant with Arnold's child, Erna left her job to become a housewife. Whenever she was unhappy, she'd corner Arnold and make a fuss, and the couple often argued for minor reasons. Arnold had tolerated it at first, but he eventually split with her. However, Erna, who was used to being pampered, didn't want to part with him. So, she forced him to make up for her by using their child. Annoyed, Arnold would hide himself from her. Things didn't go smoothly at work for him either, and he was fired. The Black Moon Pack made him out as a joke. Later, he left with Erna to somewhere no one knew. I was surprised to hear all that. Arnold had worked hard to live a good life, but he'd screwed up, and everything he had was gone within a few years. They deserved it, if you ask me. Henrietta laughed heartily, satisfied with the way things ended up for them. They deserved it for doing all those bad things to you. The gods are fair, so people who do bad things are always punished. I nodded in agreement. Those who did bad things would always end up paying the price. I said nothing more before inviting Henrietta to dinner with me.